Now we'll give it to 10:03 and that'll be the starting point. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time and joining us. I guess at this point, we'll give it another shot at looking at what Matt has, and I guess some logical, maybe I'll say changes or thoughts, if anyone can think of any, that can try to accomplish the goal of reducing the cost of housing in Connecticut and while still protecting the environment. Unfortunately, we haven't made a lot of progress on that, and hopefully we can make a little today. So thanks for coming. And Stu, you want to?
Well, let's go. Jim, you got any thoughts that you want to share first?
No. I think I think this is going to be kind of like a let's take the pasta, throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of day, right? I think I have no preconceived notions of where this conversation should go. But I'm gonna leave it to the subject matter experts to kind of, wade through Matt's proposal or Matt's draft regulations, and we'll see where we get. And it does look like Alicia has her hands up.
Hello, Alicia.
Good morning. Just a quick question because I couldn't miss the last meeting and I've been having some email issues over the last 2 days. Where did we end up at the last meeting? Did we end up with anything or anywhere? Just a quick summary.
I don't think we made much progress as far as I can remember. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end, if I go back and watch the video, I think Jim had summarized some of the things that were agreed to, right? In terms of things that, short-term versus long-term plans, right? That we have a data gap in really making a scientifically sound decision for long-term planning. But in the short term, there could be some things that could be recommended. And then I don't know if you were in the bigger group meeting last week, but it sounded like training and funding and data management were the three big things that were kind of shared across the three smaller groups as being hurdles for success.
Yeah, I think those are the only concepts we could find consensus on, if I remember correctly, which, I mean, I think there were something on, I guess I was hoping that we'd find some more that would really give us some meat, but
Yeah. So I think I want to circle back, and I guess that this is, we'll call it a little bit of contrast between what I wrote and what Matt's group had proposed last spring. And I want to remind everybody that what I had written was more or less a takeoff of the existing regulations within the framework of the existing DPH regulations and what was proposed last spring. Trying to come up with a way to move, we'll call it move things along. I'm going to say that using the concept that time is money, the DPH right now, today, is de facto a month or two out on approvals where DEP sorry, a year to 18 months to get an approval for new systems. That time does two things. One, where the legislature is saying housing crisis. They need houses now, not 18 months or 2 years from now, now. This gives moving forward with delegating authority to for more systems, and taking away that lot line. The whole concept of per property discharge gives developers and their engineers flexibility to try to move things along. We've gone round and round, and I don't think anybody has been able to clearly identify some environmental risk that's posed by removing a lot line from the equation. There's a lot of, well, it might, well, what if, well, no. You've got to actually be able to say, this is going to happen. We know that the big systems have been designed, they've been installed, and they're being maintained in accordance with the DPH regs now. And we know that they can work. We know that their regulations are scalable up into that 7,500 to 10,000 gallon a day number. And I'm not so stuck on the size, the ultimate size, whether it's 7,500 or 10,000. What bothers me is this concept of per property, and we're all in a circle here. We're going to call it our circle of friends, where I'm being faced on a regular basis with people who come in and say, hey, if I can't do what I want on my, get what I need to get out of this on my property, we're going to draw a lot line up the middle. And it's just inefficient, and there's just there's no winner. Nobody's really winning there. All we're doing is doing something arbitrary to meet a regulatory, to meet a regulation. I don't see the environment getting anything out of that. So going back to that, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can find some consensus on that issue, and then discuss what the maximum discharges are, whether that be 10,000, 7,500, or some other number that DPH is gonna regulate. I think in the proposal that I had put forth, and then there was the second one that incorporated much of our earlier discussions. We put some controls in there, and we did talk about those last time. And those controls were intended to make sure that we didn't have direct stacking of leach fields, one uphill of the other, that there's consideration for nitrogen. It's an augments what Matt's group had put forth last year. I'm simply saying, instead of the very cookbook methodology, which it sounded like you guys were a little unsure of to begin with, and not all that comfortable with. I'm saying we're going to come up with a melded formula, which is very standard cookbook stuff. There's no rocket science here, and the information needed for input into that nitrogen analysis is readily available to any of the engineers, because we all run drainage reports, the stormwater management plans. We know what the surface characteristics are on the site, and we can assign both runoff and infiltration coefficients to those. So you're kind of, killing a number of birds with one stone here. And the real sticking point here, if you zoom right back in on it, continues to be that, that lot line, removing that lot line concept from the equation. Maybe there's a melded way to do this. Maybe there is some other control that can be put in place to address other concerns, but absent, somebody coming up with having an epiphany here as to precisely why that is a problem, I just don't see why it's, why we can't move forward with that. That's really what the legislature is after. They want houses. They want houses now. I'm kind of a free market guy. I'm not going to say that on day one they're going to cost less. Yes, there is some savings I can't, we can all go through a million actuarial analysis of it and say it'll cost less or whatever. I don't know, but what I do believe is that when the market starts to become saturated with housing units and everybody has a house available to them, that the price comes down. That's the way it's always been with real estate since World War II, and I think that's the way it's going to go forward. So I see a bunch of hands up. All right, well, Audra, why don't you?
Who was first?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't see hands. Audra, are you first?
Technically,
I'm
David,
happy
you
to
had your
second.
hand up first, but I presume that was an accident. And I think Audra and then Alicia.
Yeah, and I think, what we did find consensus on last time was that we're all working towards that same goal, right? Of what the charge was. And so I think there's a little bit of a disconnect, and putting stuff on paper for me is always much easier to really understand what the impact is going to look like. So Stu put together a proposal, Deep provided some feedback on that proposal, and then offered additional suggestions. And then during discussion last week, Stu, you elaborated on some of the finer points of the details that you put together, which I think was great. But for me to really sit down and have that discussion, I need to see like what that whole picture really looks like on paper, right? And like, let's do some math and calculations to see what that's going to look like. One of the big challenges with the lot lines when we played that through at Deep was really trying to determine jurisdiction between Deep and DPH. That was one of them. We all agree that water does not care about lot lines, right? Does not care. And so we really need to like put some scenarios on paper, I think, for us to be able to really put our best foot forward to understand what that impact's going to look like. And that's going to narrow down some of the variables, I think, and then building that into Matt's proposal from last year, right? Like, let's find those specific roadblocks to try to get through them. But for me, it's challenging just to do it in a narrative context because there's a lot of assumptions being made, and I don't have Stu's plan right in front of me or the last session memorized. But that would be my recommendation is let's put some plans down on paper for everybody to look at.
Okay, specifically, I'm just trying to zoom in on
Yeah,
this.
please.
When you say some plans on paper, what would you have in mind?
So like maybe we can come up with some hypothetical projects, right? Like let's take a location, a project in an area, and let's work through what that design could look like, right? And then let's pretend we throw lot lines out the window. Okay, what's the next project next door look like? What's the next project next door look like, right? So we can really understand and see what the mounting is going to look like, what the nitrogen is going to look like. Last time we talked, at least from Deep standpoint, we all recognize that sites are not all the same in Connecticut. There's clearly a difference between what's on the coast and then what is upland. And so maybe we do a scenario where we're just looking at the coast and a scenario where we're looking at upland land, right? So we can really start to like model that on paper, back of the envelope, not super fancy mod flow, right? Just back of the envelope type calculations.
My thought on it, Audra, is there's so many, if we want to take a real scientific approach, there's so many different variables out there to say it's coastal versus upland. I mean, you can move around on a 100-acre chunk of property and see everything under the sun. But what gives me, I guess, facts and scientific support is if we can't identify any properties or any projects that have been designed in the past, I forget what we said, 10 years, 15 years, that have been problematic, we all admit the lot line means nothing, absolutely nothing to this exercise or to the environment. So if the myriad of sites that have gone through the DPH over the past 15 years haven't created a problem, my scientific perspective is I think the probability of it coming in the next 10 years is not that great either.
But again, I think this was something we've covered twice in meetings now where there's a lack of data to support that, right? And we have anecdotal information from Deep and from DPH and local health departments that systems do fail and there are challenges. And so just the lack of data, right, was one of the things that we had concluded last time was something that needs to be worked on. So when I'm proposing here to move us like light years forward, is to put some scenarios on paper where all of the scientists and the mathematicians in the room can look through it and identify what that unique challenge is to be. That's going to give us, we're the science
Okay.
committee, right? We're the science committee. That's what other people are looking for, is a scientific resolve here and a recommendation.
The problem I have is we actually FOIA'd we requested data on any systems that had failed.
I think we're going to go round and round here, Dave.
Excuse me. We requested the data on any systems that have failed. I would have to scientifically say the empirical evidence, since none were found, is stronger in favor of this than against it.
That's not accurate. I provided data. I provided a folder full of systems that have failed that my team has worked on in just the last 2 or 3 years. So this has been provided to the committee.
Those were ones that were designed in accordance with the current public health code, or some, at least since the MLSS was instituted?
No, some of these are historic.
Well,
we call them
okay.
legacy. Well, so there's two, right? There's two
Apples
different.
and
That's what I'm saying, the
oranges.
lack of data. So again, I'm trying to put us forward in a situation where the science committee can provide scientific information to the other committees who have requested that from us. And the only way that as a scientist I can do that is to have some stuff on paper, some scenarios for them to play out here.
Well, okay, so let's hold that thought for a minute. Let me jump over. Alicia's been waiting patiently. Let's see what Alicia, are you there?
Yeah, so in terms of what was said earlier as to your proposal, Stu, and he hasn't seen anything that says it won't work. Well, I read through both, and I think Audra's paper made a good case of why it's not the best idea going forward. And in my mind, just saying it's already happening, so let's just sort of make it official and add other loopholes is not where we need to go. And I am definitely, I am very much in favor of making sure that things run more smoothly for appropriate development, for sure, because I don't think are the folks that are building housing, whether it's affordable or other housing, should have unnecessary roadblocks for sure. But I'm not in favor of sort of, trading one devil for another when there's data available that says this is not a good idea. And I reading Audra's report carefully, it convinced me that the data is there.
Well, but the data wasn't provided.
The data was provided through links in shared folders twice. In Excel spreadsheets where my team manually went through and took DMR data and put them in spreadsheets for you guys.
Yeah, on older systems.
This is the data that's available, right? Which brings me back to, there's a data gap. Data does exist. It's in paper form, and there's a data gap, right?
Yeah. That would be all right.
Isn't the subject systems are the DPH systems. So I'm trying to understand. I guess here's my confusion, Audra. We're proposing to take an approach like the DPH, or like the DEP has, or DEP now, and we're arguing that that's a much better methodology. I think we're saying that there are a number of failed sites through the DEP methodology, but I don't think we found any, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but we asked formally what sites that had been designed by DPH methodology recently, I'll call it, had failed.
So
And
before Matt answers, Sonia was here last week saying that there were.
Excuse me. I'm talking to Matt right now, if I could. So I think that if that's the case, I mean, that leaves us with an even greater puzzlement, doesn't it?
I mean, I can't really. I'd have to go through. Off the top of my head, I don't recall any recent failures of large systems, but that doesn't say much considering there's a lot in my head at the moment.
Yep.
And Sonia and or other locals would be more on their minds because they're dealing with it more directly. So I would probably trust what the locals have to say over what my office says, because we wouldn't hear about it right away. Eventually we would, if obviously we have to approve any physical repairs on any of those systems. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's glaring at the moment. But that, like I said, I don't know if I'd hold too much stake in that either, considering what's going on in my office, and being able to keep track of these things is not that easy.
Okay.
Well, okay. So, hey, Matt, just a couple of questions here. I want to make sure I'm not getting too far off base. Are you comfortable with reviewing and approving septic systems up to 10,000 gallons? Forget the lot line issue for a minute.
Yes, 10,000 gallons is something that we could take on for sure.
Okay. All right. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not wed to the 10,000. It is what, whether it stays at 75, goes to 10, that's not the point. I keep circling back. This lot line thing is the one that's really got me hung up. And it's been something that, it's been in the middle of our business now ever since I got in here. And Alicia used the term loophole, and that's been, I think, is also kind of sticks in my craw, because it isn't actually a loophole. It's the way the law was written long before subdivision of land was long before DEP ever got a regulation that said per property. Subdivision goes back to the 1930s. And DEP didn't even come along till 1968, 9, 70, something like that. So bottom line is, our entire state is based on subdivision. Everybody's piece of property, the majority of the pieces of property in this state have been subdivided and probably re-subdivided a number of times. So it isn't a loophole. It's an unfortunate fact that we're using the existing laws to be able to facilitate development. But I think it's inefficient. And from my perspective, look at it from my perspective, strictly as a businessman. I make more money if I have to subdivide the land and do 2 different developments. I make more money if I have to do a DEP system, because I spend a lot more time doing it. But I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of, if you want to help the legislature, achieve the goals as I understand them. If I'm wrong and I'm misunderstanding their goals, then we shouldn't be having this conversation, and somebody enlighten me and tell me, that I'm wrong. But if their goals are more houses and hopefully less expensive, if somebody else has a better idea, go ahead and throw it out there. But I can tell you that, and you guys kind of chimed in with it from a negative perspective, and that is, we probably will see, if this was passed, you would probably see a bunch of developments that would be proposed where you normally would have seen a lot line. So you're going to see a more integrated development, and people are going to want to move forward with DPH. You guys viewed that as probably not such a good thing, because you're going to see a lot more work. But the bottom line is, I think it achieves their goals. That's what they want. If somebody has something else which is going to move it forward immediately. I saw Audra's email, and look, I am all on board with anything you can do to smooth the process in DEP and get things moving. But you talk about a long-term goal. I'm not being, Mr. Meanie here, but the fact is, the wheels grind slowly in DEP, more slowly than just about anywhere else. And the reason is that the architecture of your organization is built on the intertwining and layering of regulations that don't permit flexibility. You are inflexible. It can't be otherwise, that it's going to take a long time. Matt's organization is built on prescriptive regulations, so if you comply with the regulation, you get a permit and it moves things forward. If the objective is moving forward, it has to go to DPH. And one of the low-hanging fruit here is this lot line thing. I agree completely. If a couple of us could get together, maybe a face-to-face thing, if Audra would like to see some, let's do some, theoretical or hypotheticals to see if we see a boogeyman in the bushes here that's gonna come out and bite us. Like I said, there's controls that I think can be built into this. But you can get a product that's gonna facilitate some development. I think we can build in things with respect to hydraulics, for instance, coming up with separating distances if they're stacked on a hillside, saying you can't put 150 feet directly uphill if it's above 5,000 or 7,500, pick a number. But say you got to stay 100 or 200 feet uphill, or you got to go side hill, stuff like that. We can come up with some controls. Anyway, so I'm sorry, I'm taking up all the time. You guys go ahead and.
Hey, Audra.
Can I just chime in here for a second? It sounds to me like we're coming to some bit of consensus about how to move forward with exploring Stu's idea a little bit here, right? So Stu's made an overture that, or Audra first suggested, some modeling or some scenarios that maybe Stu and David could provide. And Stu is now saying, let's get together with a handful of folks and go over some scenarios. So if that's a method by which we'd like to move forward, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I can we all agree that might be something or a direction in which we can explore?
Makes sense to me if everybody else does.
The only hesitation, and now I totally agree with that, guys. Once again, though, I don't think that this is going to be something that we could do in that time frame that we need to get past if you want this thing to go July 2026. I think that, yes, we could probably sit down and work this out, but I don't think that it's realistic to think we could do it in that time frame. That's the only thing that I could add to that.
Maybe, can we set a timeline to do that that's out beyond it? Is that, maybe it's a year out, Matt, I don't know. Hey, Audra, I have one question too, because you brought up so one, we have the lot line, I'm going to say respect to environmental issues. But you also said, if I heard you correctly, that there's a jurisdictional question with this lot line. Could you elaborate on that?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to pull up the deep document, which I don't have right in front of me, that we provided. I know something else on that form was the reserve area that's required for land was something that we threw out there. It's something that, at deep, I know that DPH has 100% reserve requirement for land, which sometimes impacts how much land can be built on. And that was something that we thought we could throw in is one of those issues of like, maybe if you put in extra technology, you can reduce the 100% reserve. Again, I'd have to pull up the whole document to get into the other additional things. I'm wondering, Matt, to your point that you mentioned that it's going to take a little bit longer. And I agree to go through some of those specifics. I'm wondering if there's I call it like the septic calculator, an spreadsheet model that somebody, right, as maybe the consultants already have built that helps them make those decisions, right, of where things need to go, that would help us expedite the process in terms of reviewing and finding those roadblocks and variables, right? If we add, additional boundary conditions of, ahead of a system, then it's going to result in XYZ.
Right. But you know what, Audra, you brought up something before, which I think I would like to do if I had the time, and that would be to pull some of these past projects that have implemented the lot splits. And we could look at those and use real world examples to see how that might affect it. And I definitely have a couple in mind right off the top of my head that I could think of then we can look at these and see how would that, hash out with this. So yes.
If you can pull them out, Matt, if we could, have a quick get together, because it sort of boils down to, you know, your group and Audra's group, in terms of having the knowledge and concerns, to be able to come up with the ideas and then come back to everybody and say, okay, here's what our thoughts are. Here's what, what we identified as the good, the bad, or the ugly, that comes out of this. I see Alicia's hand up, and I'm sorry, we're not ignoring you, Alicia. Do you want to?
No, and Matt, I think that's a great idea. If you've got some sites that we could look at that way, that's absolutely a great way forward. I like that. Alicia,
There you go.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt that conversation. I just had a thought before this subject came up, but I think we should definitely do some consensus mapping. Whatever the consensus items were from last meeting, we should definitely put those in writing and make sure everyone is on board with that. If you want to, we can put those together. Just thinking going forward to kind of assist with making sure that, we're all in agreement on things. I can put together a quick sort of consensus mapping survey that we can take in between meetings, just to help with the report to the larger work group. I just don't have time at this point to watch the last meeting. I'm also on another working group that I'm just sort of I'm neck deep in right now. So
Okay. So hey,
but
Jim,
I think and I'm on board with with Audra with having things in writing. I'm hearing you, Stu, but sometimes I don't really unless I see it in writing. I'm not quite getting what the very specific issues are here.
Well, that's what we're trying to get to. See, right now, we're trying to identify the issues. That's what the purpose of getting to get together would be to take what's been proposed, and it's, again, what I'm saying is it's kind of an add-on to what Matt's group was already proposing for shifting things around. So try to identify the issues and then get back to everybody and say, here they are. I can't write them down right now because I'm not sure what all the issues are until we talk about them. So I can't say, here's the answer. So
I'm
I was going
wondering
to say for Jim, hey, Jim, where do we stand with the time frame now? In terms of how could we try to work this together?
You're on mute, Jim.
Thank you. So I think all of our subcommittees right now are a bit behind. Obviously, the topics being covered are detailed and at times a bit complicated. So I think we were a bit optimistic in our mapping the calendar for our timelines here. So it appears that I think a ideal scenario is that we have all our working groups really kind of reporting out by the second week or so of January for us to be able to basically for John, Sonia, and I to draft a entire report for the working group within those 2 weeks. It's a short turnaround time, but obviously the work being done at the subcommittee level is really important. And if we want to be thorough and give each other as much time as we possibly can, we're looking at, again, the second week of January.
Okay. So is there a way that we could have an in-person get together? Matt, you said you had a couple in mind that you would like to discuss. Is that something you can pull those plans and we can look at those?
Yeah, I gotta see. We've been living out of boxes for 3 years now. So Yeah, it's been a real pain in the neck. So I could probably pull. I'm thinking of one. It's in Easton, and I just remember it never went through because there's some other complication. But anyway, that was the biggest one I ever saw. So that many lot splits and that many gallons. I think my office at the time made tens of thousands of dollars in review fees, which is like unheard of for my office. So that tells you that was significant. And so that one I definitely would pull that one up. But I'm gonna see if I can have that because I think there'd be like a stack of files, but it'd be something we could look at for sure.
Well, is it something you can do in a timely fashion so that we could have a get together? I'm willing to drive to Hartford if you and Audra and whoever else wants to get in on this. And
I
just
I
sit
think
down and say, here's the issues and write down if there's a solution. And if there isn't, there isn't, but we got to be able to say that. Here's the issues, here's the solution.
Mhm.
I think part of
Yeah.
the challenge for deep side of the house is we're getting close to the holidays. And I don't know about you guys, but I have gremlins and holiday vacation time
Mhm.
already scheduled. So in person is going to be really tricky for me. Um, and that's why I was hoping electronically, right? Again, the hypothetical situations, Matt, you could maybe dig through the boxes, and I feel your pain on that. We just built a castle in my office with some boxes. Um,
Do you have them
and
in
maybe share
PDF?
them electronically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you get them as PDFs, Matt?
Well, this was like 15 years ago. I might be able to.
Oh,
Well, you know
well,
what though? That engineer, I might be able to, or the town, and see if I can get those. So I'll look into that. That particular project, I really would like to look at that one because that one would, it just, I've never seen that level of lot subdivisions
yeah,
ever in my
yeah.
30 years.
Well, that might be a good one to look at. It looks like Mark has something to say. Was that one of yours, Mark?
No, no, but I have, I'll be honest with you, there is one that recently I was asked to look at. And it's one that Matt is very familiar with in Monroe,
Monroe.
in which
Oh,
they actually looked at doing the subdivision of lots to get the maximum amount of apartment units. And quite frankly, even if you looked at it without lot lines, it wasn't going to work. Okay. It was an abortion, quite frankly.
mhm.
But so there are, and one of the things I was going to say is that, listen, this is really, this committee is really also, let's keep our focus of where it really is. It's nitrogen, okay? I mean, there are other issues. There's capacity, there's all sorts of things that are being folded in here because they all kind of interrelate. But when you're really looking at nitrogen, and I get this, okay? I mean, we have our own nomographs. I mean, you can do a lot of things by, there is input data, Stu, you're very familiar with, that goes into between rainfall, precipitation and dilution and capture and in the area. So when I look at a project and somebody comes to me, the first thing I look at, I don't even look at hydraulic capacity. I just look at nitrogen in terms of the area that I need. And I'm talking physical area that is required in order to get the dilution down. And we use a number of 9 because there's always in situ values in there. And I'll give you a perfect example. So if you go through and do it and we plug in the numbers, and I've just pulled one out at 4,000 gallons, just a 4,000 gallon a day area under the current, and I say this, not the numbers that everybody plays with 60 and 40, what's coming out of the septic tank and the leaching field. You have to look at realistic numbers today, and I think Audra would confirm this, is that concentrations are concentrations. We may have less water, but we'll also have higher concentrations, so the load is still the same. So if you're looking at it purely on 4,000 gallons a day, domestic waste or whatever, current standards, I need 8 acres of legitimate watershed to handle 4,000. Now let's just up that up to 10. That's 2.5 times legitimate acreage, because all the precipitation you think, there's runoff that comes off, there's not everything goes into the ground. You're lucky if you get 20% that goes into the ground during an annual basis. So when you look at it, these areas, watersheds are going to be massive that are going to be required. And yes, there are ways of dealing with it. You can add it by, stormwater, that sort of thing. But that again comes down to being, how do you get it so it's prescriptive? I can do it with, with some nomographs on the basic concept of I need this in order to develop and say I can get that number. But they are massive areas. So I'm just saying, be careful where you're going here, because you may actually be knocking yourself out of the box, in terms of size. You even talk 20,000, 10,000 gallon a day areas. If I'm talking 2.5 times 8 acres, that's 20 acres. So 10,000, I need a 40-acre site of actual true watershed that can dilute that area to get to the nitrogen levels. And that's what this is all about. Remember, that's what this committee is all about.
You're certainly right on the numbers in terms of pure infiltrative versus runoff coefficients. But the one thing that I just want to interject in that regard is almost every one of our developments, I would guess down on your end of the state too, Mark, we're infiltrating stormwater now. Our actual runoff coefficients have really dropped, simply because we're being forced to put at a minimum the 1.3 inches. And what happens effectively is every small storm during the year gets reintroduced. So the effective stormwater.
Stu, I don't disagree with you. That's anyway, engineering. That's engineering. And,
yeah,
and again, you have to be cognizant of how that relates to the regulator.
Yeah.
You and I can do it from a design engineering aspect. It's very difficult. So from an engineering standpoint, you have to prove it. You have to prove it.
I agree with you, and that's one of the things that I was hoping to be able to discuss with them if we can get an in phase. I'm not real good on the Zoom. But anyway,
it's so much more efficient too.
But I just want to circle back to, let's say we do nothing here. Let's say we can't come to a consensus, and the default that's going to happen here is it's going to go right back to Matt's proposal last year. If we look at this purely from the perspective of nitrogen, is that a step forward or a step back? In terms of what we're discussing here. When we talk to Alicia used the devil, there's this devil or that devil. Which is the bigger devil? The devil, with the with that very simplistic nitrogen model that was proposed last spring, or the devil that might pop up with no lot lines. And I'm curious.
Well, and when I look at this, Matt, everybody says we need a prescriptive way to handle it. Matt gave that to us, right? Very clearly what he gave us and what everybody responded to was exactly that from a nitrogen perspective. You say we got to focus on nitrogen, Mark. I agree. But everybody then says when you focus on nitrogen, yeah, but hydraulics. So swinging it right back to nitrogen. The reality is, if you took Matt's proposal and simply said, I'll give you a thought. Instead of Stu's proposal, we could take a piece of property that's just one lot. We could draw a line on that piece of paper, not actually file that line at town hall and say it's two separate properties. I mean, does that help everybody? Because that's exactly what's happening with Matt's proposal. There'd be absolutely no difference whatsoever.
So I'm gonna, Dave, on that. So I had the conversation with Matt last year about this, and I basically, the plug and play on that, actually, I'm not in agreement with, because it doesn't really, it's just plug and play. You're using a whole piece of property. You're not using a watershed. You can just, if you just put in, a lot that meets that formula, and the septic system is on the opposite side of the watershed, you've actually accomplished nothing. So I have different viewpoints on this in terms of what I considered developable acreage and watershed acreage. And that's not being held, that's not being told inside the proposed regulation because it's just a prescriptive number. That if you fit this number, then you are okay. But it doesn't necessarily address the nitrogen issue.
Well, you're absolutely correct. We agree 100% on that. But the reality is, if we don't come up with some kind of substantive regulations, and again, keeping in mind, we're supposed to be moving in the direction of facilitating housing. If we don't do it, it's going to default back to that. That's where we're headed here.
Yeah, and I agree, Stu, with you. I agree with you. It says it goes back to that. But I mean, this whole idea of housing, I agree. We need to be able to deal with it, but you cannot be developing housing at the substituting it for not addressing the environmental side as well. So I get the legislators, I get everybody, they want to do it all to develop housing, but we got to make sure, and I think that's what this committee is about, making sure that what we're suggesting is not going to compromise the environment. So.
All right.
You have
all right,
both
I
Matt
see
and
Alicia. I'm
Alicia.
not sure whose hand went up first. There's Alicia and Matt.
I'll let Matt go first.
So, I mean, if you guys read between the lines as far as what was proposed, that's particularly the prescriptive formula, which was basically going to be implemented in areas that are not considered in nitrogen sensitive areas. It was beyond generous. I'm well aware of that. I think if you really took a look at that, and we already hashed out, and I don't have the number in front of me, but we came up with the number of bedrooms that would facilitate per acre, which was almost ridiculously high. That was going to be a big gimme. And as far as it basically, it would allow a lot more development, which I think was the whole purpose of this, to make areas, again, that were outside of these nitrogen sensitive areas, to implement this very, very, very crude formula. But it was simplistic enough that it could be quickly and easily implemented, and you can get a lot more density of housing, again, outside of these nitrogen sensitive areas. I mean, that was the objective at the time. So, I would just recommend, I mean, again, it's hard for me being on this committee to try to be critical of the proposal that we made. So it's a weird position I'm in. So I kind of feel like I'm just listening to what everybody has to say, and then just giving you sort of my feedback on it, and being mindful of what's already been proposed. But I think if you really sit down and look at what was proposed, you're getting 10,000 gallons per day, and you're getting this huge nitrogen requirement reduction. And the other thing I want to say too, just my personal experience when it comes to subdividing lots, and Stu mentioned this, the fact that you said it's a pain in the neck is actually a good thing. That means to tell me that it's dissuading people from doing that. And you have to realize at some point, there's a reason we have systems that have to be regulated by DEEP, because they are either very complex, or they're huge amounts of gallons that require an initial review that's very specific, but also a long-term review. But what I was thinking is, I think by the lots division, it's probably unlikely that if we kept it the way it is, that you're going to see 100,000 gallons, 10 lots at 10,000 or something like that. It's just not going to be feasible. And maybe that's what the intent was, that, once we get beyond these numbers, they should probably have city sewers. If we're talking hundreds of thousands of gallons of sewage, maybe that's the solution, that these areas really need better infrastructure, and on-site systems are not the way to go. I mean, so I hate to step back like that, but you got to look at this stuff realistically too. And again, the coastal areas, we can't be the stuff that I saw in Sonia's area, I had two 7,500 gallons, and nitrogen was not implemented at the time. And we had the wetlands folks just dictating nitrogen policy. So at least if we had this rudimentary formula, you could show the developer could have sort of pushed the wetlands folks at bay and said, no, here at least we had a requirement. We went through it and we showed that it met it. And so that's another plus of having this rudimentary formula there, that it keeps the nitrogen issue within our realm, which is something that we could deal with. But if you don't address it at all, somebody else is going to deal with it, and you're not going to like that. And so just want to throw that out there. I know he said quite a bit, but
Hey, Matt, I have one, I'll give you one comment to your thought. With respect to sewering it, I mean, the reality is if you go to Cape Cod, they're now able to remove the same amount of nitrogen for far less money. I think it's 50% less than connecting a house to a sewer. From a cost perspective, if we're going to try to help in Connecticut, that's not the way forward. I think it was just last night in Old Lyme, they voted sewers down because they're too costly. So,
Really?
I mean, yep. So I think
think about on the coast, though, those systems that are literally getting washed out by the ocean. I mean, at least if we had a sewer main there, we would eliminate some of that issue. It's not even just the pollution.
Or move the water off I mean, it doesn't have to be sewered. You can move the water off the coast and have a leach field, right? A treatment unit and a leach field. There's 100 ways to skin a cat.
Right. I don't know. Just some areas I think are just not meant to be on septic systems. They really should have sewers, period.
We can agree that you have to move water in some instances, right? It just, there's no space whatsoever. I don't, but I guess I'm not in favor of doing it in a more expensive way if there's a less expensive way.
Well, see, and I don't think anything that's been suggested here allows people to build in an area that they weren't already going to be able to get a permit for a septic system for. We're not asking to relax any of the standards with respect to, depth of ledge, depth of groundwater, but pick one of the limitations, I mean, we're not, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about practicality and reality coupled with, which is, why is the lot line there? The water doesn't care about the lot line, but coupled with the idea of trying to cut costs, facilitate the building and so forth. But absent, I don't know. Everybody, seems to be around here.
And Matt, I don't know that we disagree with you in anything you said with respect to what you proposed, right? The issue became when we're faced with the task of how do we look at housing, is there anything that could be thought of that might not really change what you've proposed, however, have cost benefits, right? So logic, I understand the logic. I hope everybody understands, or maybe I'm in left field. I understand there's pushback against it. But I just don't really understand, materially speaking, what it changes from what you've proposed. Not that what you propose is good or bad.
Right.
So, Audra.
I just wanted to note that Alicia wanted to talk.
Well, she took her hand down. She clapped. Do you still want to talk,
No,
Alicia?
I clapped. That was me.
No, she clapped. She was somebody. Well, I don't know.
Alicia?
I did take my hand down because after what Matt said,
Okay.
but I think I'm just, Woodridge Lake is coming to mind right now with and sometimes it's not just the cost of city sewer that's the issue, right? It's development density. Woodridge Lake, even though it's been identified for years that there is serious nutrient loading issues from the housing density and the issues with septic around it, yet there is no way to stop development around the lake that's making it worse. So when we're talking about things like getting away from really thinking about nitrogen and only looking at things like lot lines, which Audra, carefully reading your report, I really felt was not the way to go if we are going to get a handle on nitrogen. It just, like I said, I'm thinking about Woodridge Lake. I'm thinking about just the fact that, if we are going to move in the direction of just looking at things like lot lines and not thinking about nitrogen as we should, we are going to be moving in the direction of inappropriate density. And we already have no really good measures in place to say, no, we should not build here because there is either a issue getting drinking water or an issue with wastewater. And so it's not going to get us where we need to go in general.
Yeah, so no, Alicia, I appreciate you bringing that one up, and I will just know that system, which predates me, is definitely unique, and the design is everything about that is unique. But it is a good example of a system that is just not well placed. Is the best way I can characterize that right now. That is leading to challenges. And Alicia, I don't know if you knew, but we had on the 10th, I think, we had somebody from Long Island Sound and then from USGS come to do a training for my team on updated nitrogen models, so like nitrogen 2.0. And USGS shared a lot of information that's specifically focused on septic systems and fertilizer impact. So happy to share that video with you if you'd like it. But it was very informative. It is being modeled, it is being looked at from a federal and a state level. And so we do need to be mindful of those things. Connecticut is also just about to put out water quality criteria for nutrients for lakes and estuaries. Those are criteria that are coming down the pipe here soon during the triennial review. Those will be public notice, I think, sometime after the first of the year. So it does all kind of connect together, right? So pulling us back to nitrogen, my thought was, again, put some stuff on paper. Let's come up with some hypotheticals to see what that looks like. That I agree with Matt in that what DPH provided was more than generous in the ability to build denser in areas that are not nitrogen sensitive. And so when it comes to the cost component, right, to what the legislature was looking at is, I don't really know how it doesn't fit that need. And so I think DPH put their best foot forward and then some, more comfortable than Deep was ready to provide, but understands the challenge that we need to be able to provide housing. And that was the way to do it. So again, I think if the idea is to pick apart what Matt put on the table, I keep saying Matt, but it wasn't Matt, it was DPH, they're an agency, if we want to pick that apart, let's put the hypothetical on the ground and see where it falls flat or doesn't give you what you need as an engineer and a developer to get that denser housing, right? But again, on paper, so we can all see it and we can all critique it and have time to spend with it.
Thanks, Audra. I would love that recording if you could send it to me.
Yeah, I'll do that right after.
And if the proposal succeeds, it's DPH, and if it's a problem, it's all Matt's fault.
See, the one thing I think we want to be careful of here is we're confusing denser and more units with efficiency and more quickly. The two are not the same. We're not talking about getting more units by removing a lot line. We're talking about more efficiently developing it, spending less money on road and other infrastructure, and being able to do one development instead of two. There is always inefficiency in that. Inefficiency is money. Inefficiency is time. Now, if you all want to say that those don't matter, then okay, then that's what you want to go back and tell the legislators. And if you think that I'm wrong, that they want to move things along more rapidly, then say so and go back and tell them that that's the way it should be. But I don't think that's incorrect. I think that if you want to at least, and nobody's trying to pick apart what Matt did, we're trying to augment it. Everything we talked about was to augment it. Mark is right. There is a devil here for the developer and the engineer. What I wrote and what I proposed might actually come back to bite many of the developers. You guys are, on the one hand, saying that what was written over here on my paper is wrong and doesn't take into account as much of the nitrogen considerations as you would like. On the other hand, you're touting Matt's, which is a much more simplistic and less realistic viewpoint. I mean, which is, you've got to choose here. It can't be, it's simplistic and unrealistic, but we're going to use that. But then we're going to be we're going to be concerned about nitrogen in a more realistic model. But we don't want to do that because there won't be a lot line. So anyway, I still would like to explore, if Matt wouldn't mind, grab the copy of that subdivision that you talked about. If you could come up with that electronically and shoot it around, whoever wants to join, maybe we could have a quick get together and talk about it, see if there is a way to work around that. You know, to look at that and say, here's the potential problems, here's our concerns, you know, here's this might be a solution to it.
So if Matt's going to put together that information, can you all, so Stu, and I don't know if Dave, you want to be involved with that, is put together what your hypothetical looks like on paper, right? So come up with a hypothetical plan with the, you know, the build on from what Matt did, right? Your suggestions, and let's take a look at that to see what that's going to look like as well, right? Because if we're putting forward a proposal to the other committees, right, to say, we think we can do X, Y, and Z, we need to put our money where our mouth is and be able to defend that. They're going to want to see, I would want to see that, right? If I'm going to accept that as a proposal.
All right, well, let's see what he's got. It sounds like it's a monster, like, you know, it
Well,
sounds like
I'm
it's
trying to
very
be
large.
mindful of timing, right? And so if
Well,
Matt's going to do his part, then I would ask that you all put together your part so we can look at them in tandem. We are running out of time. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's taking vacation around the holidays.
Well, we get that, but
We all would like to take vacation on the holidays, and people like Stu and Mark and I, we all work for ourselves, so it's we certainly feel that, Audra. But sometimes it's more efficient to, if we could sit down with the group and lay it out, you know, Matt, if you're around, to be able to sit down and just look at that. I mean, I travel wherever because I think we're all going to spend less time doing that than.
I think I have
however,
the concerns with not wanting to put it down, with you all not wanting to put it down on paper, right, for us to take a look at. So I mean, I can make time, my team, right, because I'm not just me, I'm deep, I have a team.
Well,
so we have time to do that, but if, you know, we need to see something on paper.
Well, it's got to start somewhere though, and the most efficient way, if we could all sit down at a table and look at it and brainstorm on it. And I mean, the way I understand it, let's figure out where the pitfalls are in this. And if they're pitfalls, we all want to understand it.
first thing we need to, you know, we need a baseline to start with. Sounds like we're starting with the absolute worst case that anybody's ever seen, which Matt has a copy of. You can scan that. Let's see what it is. Obviously, if that's the absolute worst case we've ever seen, then there's many of them that are much smaller. The ones in my experience we've subdivided it into two pieces. It's been the most common. So, but anyway, the first step is, Matt, why don't you see if you can get a scan of the darn thing so we can all look at it and know what we're at least facing. Can't promise that I can commit my people to doing a complete layout but we might be able to do some kind of conceptual layout. I'm just curious. You piqued my curiosity now more than anything. And who knows, maybe Santa comes early.
David, I'd like to ask Peter. I don't know how much allotted time we had for today, if it was 1 hour or an hour and 30 minutes. If Peter could clarify.
I think it was 2.
We thought it was 2, not that we want to take it, but.
Okay.
So I have one, maybe I have a misunderstanding or misimpression. Matt's simplistic, I'll call it, analysis versus what Stu proposed. It seems to me that what Stu proposed provided additional safeguards But am I missing it? He said 3 foot depth to water, wasn't it? You said
In some of them, yeah.
in some of them, you said there are certain separation distances mandated between them. Is that present, Matt, in yours? Could you have on two abutting properties, could you have a leach field? What's the closest you could have two leach fields together?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, all the points that you're mentioning are something that would have to be hashed out to make this work. I just don't think the timing is going to be something we can do.
I agree. I'm just trying to understand.
Of course.
I'm trying to understand the difference.
Well, no, I mean, you guys aren't reading between the lines. I mean, obviously, I'm telling you that the offer currently on the table is more generous in terms of development than probably something you may be proposing. So
Yeah.
you might want to rethink that, first of all. But second of all, even if we do want to go through with that, it's going to take time, even with, if I can pull up this Saddle Ridge, which I'm kind of even doing at the moment, but that all of these factors are going to have to be implemented into actually the statutes even. I was going to try to find the statute, the deep statute that talks about contiguous parcels. So not only you have a regulatory change, you're going to have statutory changes. These are huge things. This is like a fundamental paradigm shift that some of this stuff, believe it or not, it's like a domino effect that's going to happen with this. And again, I'm not necessarily against it. I've said before that this issue is definitely something that needs to be addressed. I just don't think that this is the forum to do it, or at least this is not the forum that if you're going to want July 1st, 2027 or 2026.
Well,
That's all I
what is it, middle of January, practically speaking, is when we have to do it by. Which, I mean,
yeah,
to
exactly.
me seems impossible, no matter what we do here.
It does. And the fact that, like I said to you guys, whatever this committee comes up with, then, if indeed we have to implement some changes, we have to go through with that, which means changes in the regulations and technical standards. So I'm trying to tell you guys, let's get something realistic here that's doable, that we can accomplish that. Because I want to get this thing out as badly as many of these home builders that I'm talking to. They want to get this 10,000 thing community system rolled out. That's another big win too, guys, is the community system is huge. Talk about, Stu, is some of these developments, it's pain in the neck when you're doing, 15 different little systems all over the place. Now you can just do one system, which is going to be quicker to review in many cases, cheaper to build. So there's a lot of things even with that's going to help, foster more development of these properties, or an easier process, a quicker process, a cheaper process.
Well, we agree virtually anything done by your office is quicker and cheaper when contrasted to anything that has to go through, DEEP. And
yeah. Well, in their defense,
I'm not bashing DEEP other than that's the fact of life. It's just
Well, in their defense too, what they're reviewing is a case by case. It's not a prescriptive code, so of course that's going to take.
Oh yeah, no, just saying that's the consideration.
Sure.
So it looks like Audra's hands up again.
Audra.
Yeah, I mean, I have a duty, right, and responsibility to defend Deep here. And we've talked about some of the challenges, like one senior staff person running the shop there. But it is something that Deep takes very seriously, and it is something the commissioner has taken very seriously in our 20 by 26 goals. It means to find faster permitting. And so the commissioner has already put forth, they call it fast track permitting. We are reevaluating our UIC program in 2026 to be able to meet those needs, but they are site specific, right? They are the things that do not fit the mold, and we try to fit the square into the peg there. So it does take a good bit of back and forth. I think one of the things that we definitely struggle with is incomplete applications. And so you'll hear a lot of that coming out of Deep over the next year or so, is our ability to move faster if we get those complete applications on the front end. So we hear you, and we want to be faster. And that is the goal into the future.
Well, one thing just on that note, as far as incomplete applications, as you know, my office has, sent a number of them up there, and we also do dock and dredging work occasionally.
Yep.
And that right there, the application process is another big time consuming problem that
I
we
agree.
don't face with Department of Public Health.
Yep.
There's no reason why we need to talk about compliance of the LLC partners for a, for a little residential development. I get it on the, when it comes time for industrial wastewater and stuff like that. But these little, simple septic systems, it's all of it conspires to slow things down, cost more money. The whole thing is just,
I don't think it conspires to do that. I think that's a result of historic practices and events that have happened that have really, shaped the statutes and the regs that exist today. But I hear you. We understand that, and so that's some of the things that we're looking to delve into to help address this issue, right? Because it does affect the whole state. It affects everybody, and we're all trying to move towards the same goal.
And Stu, I would just say to Audra and the Deep's credit, they're interested in holding, stakeholder conversations on this topic specifically. So that's something I think we all look forward to engaging in.
Yeah.
All right. So circling back once more, are we going to be able to have a get together to discuss these issues, or are we saying no? It's we are short on time. We either got to try it or
off
not.
Next week, just so you guys know, so to Audra's point, I took next week off, so next week's off the table for me.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is, or should we be trying to move this aspect ahead? I mean, if we're not going to get there, let's admit we're not going to get there. Are we at that point?
Well, I think we want to know. We don't even know what the question. I would like to see the plan. Can you get a scan of that plan, Matt? So we can at least think about it. Maybe it will be something that's so daunting that I can't even take it on right now. That might answer Dave's question about timing.
Yeah, I'll have to look. Like I said, when I get off, I'm going to reach out to the health department. I'm going to reach out to the engineer and see if the engineer would be willing to provide that. I mean, it's been some time. Like I said, it's probably at least 15 years ago I did that, at least.
All right. Well, anyway, would you please let us know? And then, because I would like to explore it. If it looks like it can't be done, in a timely fashion for our report now, then maybe we, but that's kind of, a lot of that's going to fall on me. If I can, Audra wants to see some kind of a layout. I don't know how far I can take it, without seeing what's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I would just say that let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that timing precludes us from getting this across the goal line in the allotted time permitted. That's not to say, I think Matt had alluded to the fact earlier that there are things worth inquiring about, pursuing, reviewing, and we could identify it as a long-term goal, and we could even request, in statute, if you will, that DPH meet with stakeholders, and provide a report or plan, by January 1st of 2027 or something to that effect, right? So it just because we can't, or it conceive, just because there may be a scenario by which we can't get this across the goal line at this very moment, it doesn't mean drop the ball or pick up the ball, pick up the football and go home, right? We can continue to explore and maybe even put some parameters within the statute or via legislation to do so. So just a thought, just to let folks know, if it doesn't get across the goal line in the next couple of weeks, that we can force ourselves, if you will, to explore it further at a later date.
Alicia?
Just also on that note, it does sound to me like there were some consensus concepts put out there. And there's no reason why those can't be brought to the larger working group, even if the details are not sort of ironed out.
I think we did that, Alicia, last week.
In writing, I haven't seen those
Uh, we-
consensus
I mean,
items.
We discussed it on the last call.
Right, but I think what the other teams have done is put them in writing to put forward. At least that's what I've seen from the other working group that I'm on. They're in writing, and then everybody goes around and agrees with them via email, and then they get submitted.
Okay.
And I'm happy to kind of synthesize previous meetings and put it in writing to float around, and I'll endeavor to do that in the next couple of days.
And just for I've been on other working groups where FOIA has been a real stickler. Just be aware that we shouldn't be having email conversations outside of this. So if Jim sends it around, then you can get back directly to him if you feel there is an issue with it.
Agree. Thank you.
How's that, Stu?
Is there anything else? And what else do we have?
Well, I mean, I think what on the agenda there was, Jim, you had discussed the recent Long Island Sound article.
Yeah, I really just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that that article is out. And I, obviously want to give kudos to the DPH, to the feds for what appears to be some marked progress with the Long Island Sound. I presume everyone's seen the article. Obviously, I think it bodes well that beyond anything we consider today or for the future of this entire working group, that there are marked improvements with regard to the reduction in hypoxia in the Long Island Sound, obviously directly attributed to a reduction of nitrogen going into the sound. So even if we do nothing, right, it appears that we are heading in the right direction with that regard.
I will note, I did read the article real quick, and I reached out to our friends in the Long Island Sound group in Deep, and they mentioned that somebody had reached out to get information for the article, but not the information we provided was in the article. So it came across a little odd to us, the way it was written. For what that's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So David,
Anybody-
there obviously, a couple of things I think as far as, obviously next steps, we'll go ahead and put into writing those concepts that seem to be amenable to the entire group, float that around for tweaking and observation. One thing I think that this group, ought to be talking about, we've talked about it briefly, I believe last week, but it's, what we expect the nitrogen sensitive areas to look like, right? What is that mapping going to look like? And how is that going to work? So right now, I presume, Matt, given the fact that you guys were promulgating regs that referenced environmentally sensitive areas, and I don't know if we should be identifying nitrogen sensitive areas or environmentally sensitive areas, what that distinction would be. But beyond that, my assumption is that mapping was already going to be taking place or has taken place, where folks would be clearly delineating where these environmentally sensitive areas would be. Can you clarify?
Yeah. So there was two separate delineation areas. There was this coastal, I don't know the exact term, but there's this coastal zone, or there's a term that they use, and that actually has an
Coastal area
existing
management.
delineation that many people were aware of. So that would be basically a line in the sand right along the coastline that says if you're in this area, that's going to be part of this nitrogen sensitive. And then the other one was the upland review. We worked with our deep partners on this in that particular program, that each individual town or town would have this area already delineated. And so then they could easily, and most engineers that work in these towns would be able to figure that out very quickly, where that boundary is. And one of the things, just to be clear on that too, in that particular case, like if you had a property and you were going to develop it in the upland area, and you had, let's say, 90% of it was in this upland review area, as long as you don't put the septic system in that upland review area, you're okay. So you could theoretically have a property that's very much in, has a large percentage of the upland review area, but then if you put the septic outside of it, you're not going to have to do it. So just keep that in mind. So bottom line, Jim, it has been delineated. And what we would do is, once this is implemented, we would make sure that people have access to this. We would do training on how to go about finding out this information and things like that. But yes.
Could I just follow up and ask, like, how those maps were determined? How is a nitrogen sensitive area defined? Is that simply areas that are under deep order now, or was there some sort of specific definition?
Yeah, that's a fair question to ask. So
Well,
here's the deal.
two
So
things.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I could clarify. First map you were talking about is the coastal area management map, CAM map. That's what's commonly referred to.
Can you explain more or less? Somebody explain to me how that map's laid out.
It's simply an offset of either 1,000 or 2,000 feet from coastal area, coastal resources. All right, so it's just a map, and like half of Old Saybrook south of 95 is in it. That's kind of the way that works. The second one you're referring to, though, a little more problematic, I think, in that it's actually what you're talking about is each town, the Inland Wetland and Watercourses Commissions are going to have a regulated area and an upland review area, or whatever you want to call it. It varies by town. Some towns are very small. I think Mark might have mentioned at the last meeting, maybe Greenwich is still 25 feet or something, very small. I'll say the majority in the state are probably around 100 feet. There are some they've gone to 100 meters. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. So it varies by town. They don't always have a good map. They usually have a map, but it's usually generalized until it's augmented with site-specific data from development. So a guy like me produces a plan, and we have a soil scientist map the inland wetlands and watercourses. We put those maps, and they put that into their GIS system, and now their offsets are recalculated. So that one's a little more difficult, and I think if you're going to pick something like that, you're going to have to pick a distance from a mapped inland wetland or watercourse. I think, you don't want to just say buy their mapping, because you'll go out of your mind. You can't, you're going to have to check their regulations in every town to figure out what it is. So anyway, that just might, I see lots of hands up, sorry.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Go ahead.
Before we move off this, Matt, so the way you proposed it was any system over a certain size falling in this realm would need the nitrogen assessment. But if you were outside of these areas and you were, I'll say 10,000 a day under your proposal, you would not, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, somewhat. It would mean if you are within those areas, in the nitrogen sensitive areas, you would have to follow DEEP's nitrogen model. If you're outside of those areas and fall in that design flow, then you would just implement that very simplistic formula of nitrogen.
So would somebody like Stu or Mark go through this process? We're in a nitrogen sensitive area. Would they go through this process and then submit it to you, or are they going to DEEP?
Nope, they're coming to us. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel with that formula. We figured Deep had it covered. And so you're just gonna implement that formula. And most engineers like Stu and Mark are familiar with Deep's formula, and they could go ahead and implement that. So that's it right there. And it would come to us. Well, normally these things get routed through the locals and then it comes to us. I think
Yep.
realistically, the understanding is we're probably going to be doing the nitrogen ourselves in-house, like the review of that DPH itself. Yes, it's going to go to the locals, but particularly the deep analysis, that's definitely going to be coming to us as engineers reviewing that.
And
do
that would
you-
apply to systems
and-
5,000 or greater in nitrogen sensitive areas.
Correct. It's either 5,000 or 7,500. I know we went for 5,000,
Right.
but there's some
So
latitude.
you don't want to back up. That's one of the things too. If you go forward with your proposal, you can't back up. You gotta move forward. Gotta
That's
stay at
something you guys should,
7,500.
then I recommend this is something you guys should put into that. That would be a change that could be potentially considered very easily.
And
So
Matt, do you think, excuse me, and Matt, do you think at this level, would you be able to review these projects if it fell under the DEP methodology? What would the timeline be for that? How would you envision that, assuming you had the help, et cetera?
Right. That I don't know off the top of my head because it's hard to predict that. And so that would probably be the biggest increase in responsibilities for our office is just doing those nitrogen reviews. I mean, it's hard for me to say.
Do you still have that 30-day, or don't you have some requirement to respond the next days?
Yes, actually, good point. I don't know if that stayed in, by the way, but there was a thing in there. If these large systems over 2,000, they come to us, if we don't respond in a certain amount of time, the local health departments can take it upon themselves and approve the project without our approval. I think we've actually removed that. No one's ever done that before, as far as I can remember in my career. No one's ever had to do that or had the inclination to do that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions with respect to this discussion?
Well,
I
yes,
have
I've had my
one-
hand up for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're getting there. We've given you a lot of time. Go ahead.
Okay, wow. So I have a couple of questions and one practical thought on the upland review areas. And my question goes to Audra on, so the upland review area is meant to essentially, it's more, so what it's more of sort of like protecting the waterways from the activities on the land, right? I have concerns that using the upland review area is not going to sort of really help with any cumulative impacts to groundwater, which essentially will have cumulative impacts to surface water. And my second thought on that is the practical implications on making the upland review area sort of part of this equation is, are the towns going to have to put this into their regulations? And with 169 different towns, that's going to be a challenge because you actually do still have some towns that don't even have an upland review area. So there's a couple of practical issues here, and I know Audra's got her hand up, and I'll let her respond to that because I'm very curious about whether this is going to be effective in areas that may have TMDLs for nitrogen when we're only looking at having reviews cited within the upland review area.
Yeah, Alicia, so I understand the challenge and the concern. I will say that I am not probably the best person to answer the question in regards of upland reviews. Matt's team worked with our wetlands folks in a different bureau, I think, to get information and think through the practicality of how that might work. But I understand your challenge, and the concern is that some of these communities don't have those systems in place. So I think that's something that still needs to be hashed out a little bit. I also wanted to just note that my team has worked with the governor's office for GIS overview. So there is already mapping data and policy analytics in place within the state at a very high level. Sometimes they work with UConn, sometimes it goes through EcoViewer, where we talk about having these maps accessible is that might be an avenue to explore as well. I think currently municipalities are required to send them parcel information at a routine interval to update those maps. And I'm sure that team would be more than willing to help out, keep and maintain those kind of maps. So that way they're readily available, recognizing they do change over time. Because that is definitely a system problem for maintenance. So Alicia, sorry, I don't have the right answer for you, but
no, that's all right. I mean, my big concern has been and continues to be going forward is that DEP's water quality goals don't always translate to local land use decisions, and
correct, yeah.
the local land use commissions, I think, probably aren't even aware of the status of their own waters as far as whether they're impaired or not. So it's just a concern I have, just because I am intimately familiar with the Inland Wetlands Act.
Okay. No, and I think that's good. And I think, one of the other projects my stormwater team has been working on with our water quality team is to update our town fact sheets. So on Deep's website now, they're probably about 10 years old. There are fact sheets for each town that give an overview of, the water bodies, impervious cover, development, if water bodies are impaired or not. And so one of the things we've been working on is to put those into an interactive story map based on data that's coming out of their annual reports, if they're an MS4 community, to be able to better track that. So I'm hoping that gets launched later this year. And that, again, another tool in the toolbox that could be helpful. And if it continues to be local wetlands and the inland commissions, that they can use that as a tool, right, for land use, development.
So what do you, based on that feedback, we're
Well, I would
I could
default
have a
back
minute.
to, with respect to the
Dave.
upland review. With respect to the upland review area, my comment would still be going back to Matt. Just pick a number, whether it's 50 feet, 75 feet, 100 feet. That's it.
what do you think, Mark?
Well, my thought is and I put this out to Matt. I mean, the upland review area, and I agree with Stu. I mean, if you just leave it up to the commissions, they get, and I've been down this road with a lot of coastal communities as far as an expert witness regarding impacts to wetlands and where activities are occurring in the upland review area. And I hate to say it, that some folks, some commissions they take literally away the jurisdiction of DPH in terms of it. So how is it actually, Matt, working with the idea of nitrogen? If I were to build, if you have 100-foot upland review area from Wetland Commission, but I want to build my system within 50 feet of the system, is that a jurisdictional issue now with DPH as well? How does that work?
All right. Well, let me answer that question. So I was under the understanding that that each town, or maybe they don't have, but if they would have an area delineated, so that 100-foot means that if you're in that, then you're going to potentially have to do the deep analysis for nitrogen. If you're outside of that, you don't. And just to keep in mind, guys, the whole purpose too is, again, we're trying to deal with a prescriptive code here and trying to keep things a review time quick, simple, easy. So that was some of this. We tried to, I mean, it's not perfect, I get it. But we tried to come up, but this, I think this is really the purpose of the committee. This discussion right now is the one that we should have had day one. But anyway, I won't go any more than that. But yes, if you want to tweak this, maybe there's some other way to tweak this. I don't
just
know.
a
So
number, though, Matt. Just pick a number.
So if you want to pick a number, you're going to need another regulatory overlay for the inland wetlands commissioners to work on.
Well, it goes by plan. It's
The upland review area dimensions have, for the commissions that are doing it thoughtfully, are sometimes sized based on the value of the resource, and that is usually a surface water resource, because groundwater protection does not fall under the Inland Wetlands Commissions. Most of the time, it falls under the zoning commissions. So if you're talking about a one size fits all, you're talking about an additional regulatory overlay within the Inland Wetlands Commissions. I'm just saying I'm talking about the practical application of this. And I don't think it's fair for a regulatory, dimension to be prescribed to each town just based on septic systems, because there are a lot of other things that the Inland Wetlands Commissions have to consider when protecting the surface waters. But I feel there's a disconnection here, though, because the Inland Wetlands Commissions, if we're looking at things like aquifer protection, it's usually not within their purview. It is specifically within zoning's purview. So I just so everybody understands how this works, there would have to be another regulatory overlay, and usually folks do try to avoid that.
Yeah, see, I would disagree that it'd have to be another one. It simply is I think what we're talking about here, and maybe I'm missing something, but we're using the term upland review area, and maybe that needs to be decoupled. And the purpose, the public health department regulations have generally worked independently of other regulatory bodies, specifically town bodies such as inland wetland and water courses, planning and zoning, and whoever. So the point is, from a public health perspective, which is what the DPH regulations are looking at, they can predict that within, pick a number again, 50 feet or 100 feet or whatever it is, if you are that far away from a resource, then you don't need the nitrogen analysis. That doesn't take away from the regulatory authority of the local inland wetland and water course commission. Specifically, they can still look at it. This doesn't say to them, you must approve it if it's inside there, but it does say that the nitrogen has been considered with respect to its impact to the resource. They still have the authority to look at things like sedimentation and erosion control, the grading, the clearing, impact on the flora and fauna in that area. So it's not taken away from them. But I think it should be prescriptive on a site-by-site basis. And in this case, when an applicant shows up with his plan is going to have individual inland wetland flags, one would hope, that were placed by the soil scientist or environmental specialists that have been located by survey. And now you've got that. And that's the plan that goes to Matt. Matt doesn't have the local inland wetland and water courses map available to him, so, at his fingertips. But what he does have is a site plan that the engineer / surveyor / developer provides him with, and that shows where the wetlands are. And then he can say, okay, this is, again, pick that number. I'm not advocating, I'm just saying, pick the number. And that's where the nitrogen analysis kicks in. How the local commission then views all of that doesn't take away from the authority that they have, other than to say that we've satisfied the public health code with respect to nitrogen.
And it's not their responsibility. The bottom line is that they don't even have to, it's our responsibility. We're just using their delineation, but they don't have to, it's nothing to, other than the fact that we're just using that delineation for our purposes. It's not their fight to fight. And to Stu's point, they can do whatever they want in their area. If they want to make their own requirements, that's fine. But at least we'll have ours in place to show that we did consider that.
Hey, Jim, I see you, but Mark, what's your take on this? Would you agree with Stu? And
I do agree with Stu. And here's the reality, though, is that
there's a first.
Well, yeah, no, it's not a first. But there is where I find that wetlands commissions have the right to do any review of any activity, disturbance, or whatever is in their upland review area. But what we're seeing is that well, I'm seeing that commissions are actually, taking view that they don't recognize DPH and that they want you to do and prove to them a full nitrogen reduction stuff. And I've gone through a lot of this recently with several towns down on the coastline. And it's appalling to me that these commissions are actually circumventing DPH. And there needs to be a stop to that. I mean, if there's activities, if I'm building a septic system and I got clearing and I got that, yeah, they have the right to look at, what does that clearing mean, that sort of thing. But they don't have the right to tell me that the DPH, you're completely compliant with the prescriptive and everything else, that all of a sudden they're taking jurisdiction of that septic system because they're reviewing groundwater. And
So
that's not
do you
your
guys,
jurisdiction.
so does everybody think, is there consensus that if we had just a certain distance from that would be clear for everybody?
My general feeling is, Dave, it's 50 feet. It's generally what it is. And I mean, because there are commissions, I'm already hearing that commissions are looking to go to 125 and 150. There's more and more take. And as you do that, it becomes a bigger battle for us as engineers. And I think it becomes a bigger battle for DPH as they go forward.
They also tend to view that property as theirs and in
Oh.
the same light as the inland wetland. It's not being protective of the inland wetland. They're being protective of the upland review area.
Exactly.
It's the same thing, and it's just push back, push back, push back.
So Matt, is that something that might be agreeable, you think, from your guys' perspectives?
Yeah, I think I might have to sit down with Alicia too to understand this a little better. I thought that when we had the conversation with our deep colleagues, that it basically says here is the delineation of the review area, not that there's a setback from that is the line. And then anything in there, we would say would have to implement the deep nitrogen evaluation. Anything outside would go to the primitive formula. That was my understanding. Like I said, I might have to sit down with Alicia. She sounds like she understands this certainly way better than I do. But that was
I'm not saying it was additive. What I'm saying is, if understanding that, those dimensions aren't necessarily they're more of sort of like a surface water protection dimension. So I think, I mean, I do hear what everybody's saying. What I'm trying to point out is, this is the practicality of it. And is this what you really want to do? And on top of that is it going to be, because what we're looking at is nitrogen that's coming from groundwater, and having that sort of that dimension that exists that the town set based to protect the surface water, is it practical for what needs to happen to make sure that nitrogen isn't migrating into those surface waters? That's what I'm saying, and that's what we need to make sure that we're thinking about. And also saying that we can't say to every town you can only have a 50-foot upland review area, but if you were going to set that standard, you also have to think about how it will be applied within each town, because each town does things, we do things 170 different ways. So it may still not be consistent unless it's implemented thoughtfully enough.
Hey,
That was the challenge, guys. I'm all ears. This is what I wanted this committee was to tell us, that if there's a better way to do it that's more protective or more practical, I'm all ears. I mean, these were the discussions we had when we came up with this, was try to find a thing that's already delineated areas that we could sort of take over and utilize that for our purposes. So if there's another way to do it, this is what we need to discuss.
And
Okay.
if 50 feet, if the science shows, and I would depend on, the folks who know the science, shows that 50 feet is enough of a setback, then you don't want to rely on the upland review areas, because some of them are 200 feet. So that's going to actually probably make things easier for you practitioners, because it will be clearer that you know, but then again, it's only clear if it's rolled out in a way that educates the Inland Wetlands Commissions and it's very clear to them. My concern is just because most of the time they pull from the Inland Wetlands Act and I haven't been sleeping well. The the model regulations. You know, how do they pull from other agency regulations within their purview, which is the upland review area?
Jim, you've been very patient then, Audra.
Yeah, no, I wanted to make a point that is, adjacent to this conversation, but I don't want to stop this conversation midway through. If Audra, has a point to make or a question to ask specific to this question, I'll yield to her and you guys can circle back to me.
Audra?
Yep. So it's not specific to this conversation. I think it's one that probably Matt's seeking feedback on and sounds like more discussion at some point, just to understand the practicality of it. There are setbacks already established in lots of different regulatory and statutory areas already, right? That can be leaned on. So whether it's 50 or 100 or whatever the number is, they already exist in other regulatory pathways that probably could be chosen. Getting the buy-in from those towns, again, to Alicia's point, is, making sure that the science backs it up is important.
So what's the way forward, Matt, do you think here? This is an area where you guys know a lot more about than me. It's not something I deal with.
So let me, and I don't know if Alicia can answer this or maybe Mark or Stu. When you guys say the 50 foot, whatever from this, what is the boundary that you're saying 50 feet from? Is that the wetland boundary?
Yes.
Yeah, it could be wetland or a
Wetland or water course.
Yep.
Okay.
Whichever flagged, legally flagged.
All right. And that could be done on an individual lot.
Yeah.
And all right. So, I mean, that would be another pathway, I guess.
Every site plan that I'm aware of in the state of Connecticut that, is actually going to fall under some form of inland wetland regulation is going to have those inland wetland flags placed by a soil scientist or other environmental specialist. And then we locate them by survey. So you see those on the maps, you see them. There's a bunch of numbered or lettered flags that, little points, and then you simply offset that, whatever the distance is. We do that for the septic system, whether it's 25 or 50 feet now. That's how we do our offsets, because remember, from the high water mark of water bodies and so forth, that's how that's established, except in a coastal setting.
All right. Well, then, so what we would need, though, after consulting my attorneys, is we have to have something, a regulatory citation about, like, let's say the wetland flagged area per such and such statute as defined. And then we would say 50 feet from that, whatever that is.
I think it would be the exact same thing that you already have. It's 50 feet from the high water mark of of water bodies. That's what I don't know about Mark. I think he's doing the same thing, but with respect to the 50-foot minimum of a septic system from what's called
defined wetlands and water course.
We stay back 50 feet, as a matter of fact. So it's the exact same thing that's already in the public health code, in the technical standards.
All right. So then what we could do in this committee is let's take that language that's in there and let's massage it and get it to where we need to get it. That'll make sure this thing moves through that much quicker.
Yep.
Yeah.
If it's in the public health.
So site, in your setback standards, Matt, separating distances, and look in there for the one that says water courses, 50 feet. Yeah. And it also has the exception for 25 feet.
Yeah.
Well, all you got to do is put footnotes. I think it would be footnote C or D now that says, 50 feet shall be the minimum, shall be the setback for the nitrogen review.
Yeah, I mean that's in the technical standards, but I'll figure that part out. I just want to start with the regulations,
Yeah,
and we
Yeah,
in
you're
our
talking about,
regulations,
yeah.
do that first, and then I'll figure out where we have a section. We redid, by the way, our technical standards is going to be much better now. It's in a format that you normally see regulations, like section 3.1.2, and we're going to have a whole section on nitrogen, and I could definitely just put that in there because it's not really a setback. It's different because the system can be within that setback area. It just would have to do this particular
Right.
evaluation.
Yeah,
Are those to be adopted in 1/1/26, Matt?
Yeah, we already knocked that out. Oh no, not 1/1/26. It's going to be right afterwards. That's why we changed the date, or we changed the stat or the regulations. I talked about when the technical standards are implemented. We changed it for that reason because we want to do it. Let's say, August 1st, 2026, just after or right after, or concurrently rather, July 1st of 2026. We actually wrote those up. We have those pretty much done right now.
If I could just ask my question, David. So just for purposes of recommendations, I want to just be clear. I think, Matt, your proposed regs, had nitrogen or I guess more specifically, environmentally sensitive areas defined as coastal areas and I believe areas surrounding lakes and
Well, upland
rivers
review area. It said if you're in an upland review area, then you have to implement. So it gave two examples of where you have to do the deep nitrogen evaluation. And I think we use the term nitrogen sensitive areas. I don't think we use environmentally sensitive. I think we said
it might have been environmental. Matt.
Yeah. I think if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, Matt, but I thought and that's why, I mean, part of the conversation was, do we define it as nitrogen sensitive areas more appropriate for our purposes? But
yeah, I think we do want to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
and
You'd agree, Matt, on that? So
yeah.
Is there consensus from everybody on the call it nitrogen sensitive?
Yeah.
So I do want to note that in the submittal that Deep provided, we went with more broadly environmentally sensitive, because we included in that evaluation, depth of groundwater for bacteria, and we included, if there's ledge, so depth of groundwater itself. So we made it a little bit more broad with some of the other, just fundamental technical challenges that run into when we're choosing a site.
so I guess just to finish my question, Matt,
Mhm.
would if we're talking about areas within the CAM map, right? And I obviously don't have a CAM map in front of me. I presume that's all land adjacent to the Long Island Sound, right?
Yes. Yep.
So then we're not talking about, say, Candlewood Lake or some other
Yep.
body of water that's not adjacent to the Long Island or okay. So I just want to be clear on that.
Mhm.
All right.
So those other bodies would be, well, it just presumably say 50 feet from the wetland or water course.
That was the idea. It was to cover
Okay.
these sensitive areas inland, sensitive areas on the coast. We wanted those two categories that deserved a higher type of review, which is the deep formula for nitrogen.
So I guess the one question is, and not being a scientist myself, is I've heard on a number of occasions, whether or not freshwater bodies of water merit merit being identified as a nitrogen sensitive area, if in fact we're talking about nitrogen and not phosphorus. Why would we identify those areas as nitrogen sensitive?
So
Well,
we do have to protect those water bodies in the water quality state regulations for water criteria. The state already has narrative and I think numeric standards for water bodies there, where essentially it's like a mini TMDL where it says this water body can only take X nitrogen, X phosphorus. And there's modeling at the state level for that. So there's already standards that exist that might help inform that, but you do have to look at both.
Yeah, and I think I know what Jim's saying. He's saying that, freshwater bodies are less
Yep.
impacted by nitrogen. The other thing too to consider is that, this upland review area or whatever, you're already sort of under the gun, and most of the time, most developers try to avoid those areas because they're having to jump through a bunch of hoops because of their requirements. So that was another reason why we chose that, was to just say, well, chances are you're probably not going to go in that area anyway. So that was, again, to try to facilitate easier development. I mean, this was all in the back of our minds when we try to put this forward, to try to balance it out. Now, is it realistic? Is it going to protect Candlewood Lake? Might not. There might, if those areas aren't delineated there, perhaps those aren't going to get looked at. And maybe that's what certain people on this committee might want to bring up and say. And I think that's what Audra's saying too, that if maybe we need to look at these other things. But that's obviously the other direction than what the home builders want. So,
well, so I'll add to that, like Bantam Lake already has a TMDL that requires loading values and restrictions. And so my recommendation to the team is just, as we're thinking through this, is the last thing you want is for a water body to become impaired for any nutrient or dissolved oxygen, because that will ultimately lead to a listing on the EPA 303D impaired waters list, and then a TMDL, in which we're now allocating loads and concentrations. Think of it as a pie, right? There's only so many pieces you can slice that pie, and that becomes a very localized, very public process where you really are restricting building at that point. And that has happened nationwide. That's where nutrient trading came out, probably a decade, 2 decades ago, where we really had to start thinking about the impacts to those water bodies. They're sinks, right? They're nutrient sinks, essentially. But they have impacts further than just nitrogen, right? That's what Long Island Sound is not impaired for nitrogen. It's impaired for dissolved oxygen because of nitrogen. That became the limiting design factor for that. So just want to be mindful of that. And again, the triennial review is going on now at the state level, and nutrient criteria are coming out. So again, 50 feet sounds great on paper, but you want to make sure you're not setting yourselves up for failure into the future here.
Well, see, Audra, that's just something I had meant to mention earlier, and your comment about the sink, the nitrogen sink in the lakes and so forth, and maybe in Long Island Sound under some situations. But one of the things that's, I'll call it the elephant in the room with respect to nitrogen, that nobody wants to talk about in this state, if the state was serious about nitrogen, they would address, and that is fertilizer. Lawn fertilizer being the biggest one, but also the agricultural fertilizer. The lawns around all of these lakes are contributing a hell of a lot more nitrogen much more rapidly after every rainstorm when people get in there and fertilize. So if
100%. Yeah. And so I will say I don't think it's an elephant in the room. I think it is well published and documented in really every non-point source document, state water plan, TMDLs that come out of the state, at least from where I'm sitting. It is well known that fertilizer is a huge
I guess my point is I'll say I'm going to say that the nitrogen that's applied as fertilizer to lawns is, that's not a necessity. Going to the bathroom is a necessity.
I
So
agree.
if we're going to look at a total nitrogen load, really there's where somebody could make some inroads, and we wouldn't be worried about the same nitrogen loads going to those lakes from a septic system that we are, with all of that nitrogen that's already
I
been dumped.
don't disagree. So when you read a total maximum daily load evaluation, it breaks things up by point sources and non-point source. The non-point source bucket, right, is anything that's not a point source. So it's the septic systems, it's wildlife, it's stormwater runoff, it's fertilizer, and it gives it a load, right? But that is not something that the state can mandate or control. So the, homeowner or whoever, right, their impact by applying that fertilizer is limiting, right, the amount of nitrogen that can go in the ground. which in turn limits how close you can build to it, right? They're all connected. It's human behavior. So if anybody has an idea on how to fix human behavior, you let me know. But I do want to circle back because I see Jim, he's going to call time on us. And come up with kind of those next steps. I'm looking through the state's Connecticut General Assembly website and all of the meeting notes that are posted here because the videos are there, and you can take those videos and plug them into an AI tool, and it'll pull out the consensus components that might help just get us a document to go around. I will note that some of the communications are not all in there. I see Stu's email with recommendation is published on the website. I don't see Deep's response or the recorded videos from USGS and second generation Long Island Sound. So I don't know if there's a delay in getting stuff posted, but I just wanted to note I don't see those in the public record yet.
Looks like Peter wants to comment.
Regarding those, sorry, I was on vacation last week, so
Oh, that's okay.
working on that. So I'm working on that, and I'll try to get those all up there. And regarding some of the things you said, I don't know if I have those. So if you can resend them to me, like the responses to Stu's email and the other thing, I'll upload
Yes.
those as soon as possible.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
I think even Dave, I think you provided a response in email as well, right? I didn't see that one.
Yeah, we had a response, I think, from Deep, from Mark, and from Greg, right? So we'll make sure those are all. Peter, I'll forward those to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I guess we're at the end of it. Any last thoughts before we
Well,
move on for Christmas?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say we should be scheduling another meeting as soon as possible. Given the time constraints and given the holiday season, I don't know if it sounds like Matt is gone. Are you, or I mean, could we come back as soon as the 22nd? I don't know if Matt, you're gone the whole week or if you're gone, Christmas Eve and beyond, or.
I'm off the whole week, but to be
Okay.
perfectly honest with you, I do check my emails. I probably shouldn't do that, but I do. So if there's anything important, I'll probably see it.
Yeah. So then I guess we're really looking, I presume, at the first week of January for getting back together. Well, and obviously, I think if we're talking about Matt, action items, I believe if you can send along a PDF of the particular project you have in mind prior to leaving, that would be great.
Yes.
I guess then, Stu, the ball would be in your court at that point to determine if there's anything that can be done in short order to provide a kind of like model that Audra would like to see for
We'll
folks
see
to
if we
critique.
can relay something out to see how it looks.
Mm.
It sounds from what Matt said like it's a gigantic thing, but we'll see if we can do it.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
probably
and-
gotta start, we probably have to start hedging our bet on what we could get, where we could all agree to on what Matt's staying within, I guess more discreetly within Matt's proposal.
And so, and again, I'll kind of try to synthesize everything where we have apparently identified some consensus and get that out to everybody as soon as I can. So we can all work offline on reviewing that stuff. And I think we should, at least before we depart today, maybe try to find a date in the first week of January. Well, I guess the January would be I guess it would be the week of January 5th.
We have a meeting on the 7th with the whole group does. Can we do it before that at any point?
I think that would be ideal.
During that meeting on the 7th, the bigger group is the expectation to report out.
It would be ideal. I
Yeah.
think reporting out was something that we had hoped to do already.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I was just thinking if we have a meeting before that, you know, what is the context or topics for that meeting to then in turn turn around and report out on. So I'm just looking at calendars, see like how fast can we turn things around to be able to report out, and then is it useful to have it right before that meeting or not? I'm not opposed. I just topics here.
Well, I am available the following week, but that's a whole nother week with New Year's. People probably took that week off, just so you guys know. So I am available starting the 29th. That's the Monday.
Oh, okay.
So I could work something out if you guys need me then.
So, and maybe we can keep that in mind, Stu, for if there is an opportunity with your plan to utilize the 29th as a kind of impromptu meeting. But for our purposes here, for the larger working or subcommittee, I have a lot of availability on the morning of the 6th. I don't know if that's something that folks can work into their calendars. That is Tuesday the 6th.
Make that work.
What time you thinking, Jim?
For me, I have the entire morning. My afternoon is kind of plugged up.
If it's usually it's good for me. It's 10
You want to
o'clock.
do 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock or after.
Yeah. All right. So then,
What do you
Peter,
got?
I would ask if everybody is fine with it, that we do a 10, at least block off 10 to 12
Mm-hmm.
for Tuesday the 6th.
Mm-hmm.
That works for me.
Yep.
And then we'll chew on if Stu has something, or we'll continue to bear down on the details of what Matt has. Is that the thought process?
Yeah, and we'll potentially use conceivably the 29th as an opportunity to have a conversation. Or yeah, because Matt said he's available on the 29th.
Yep.
Do there need to be a minimum number of people to be able to get together from the group to do that? I don't know if there has to be like a.
Yeah, I don't know if, because we're a subcommittee of a working group, whether or not there needs to be a specific quorum that we have to abide by. I wouldn't think so, but I don't know if Peter has any input on that.
No, you wouldn't. I don't believe so, because I believe the only rules about quorum is the full working group, not the sub-working groups.
Right.
Got it.
I think it does need to be noticed though.
Yeah.
So yeah, good point. I guess we could, Peter, for covering our CYA purposes, we could at least maybe schedule something now on the 29th.
Yeah, I can do that if it works for you guys.
Yeah, and I don't know what time you guys would want to do that, Matt.
I mean, it doesn't matter. That whole day looks like it's pretty open for me.
And Stu, 10, is that what you said?
No, that's okay. Just pick a time.
Oh, well, then let's
Are we doing it on Zoom or are we doing it in person?
I think I would defer to you guys.
I don't think I'll be able to meet in person that week. Mom duties.
Yeah. So, Stu, are you okay with us doing it virtually?
Okay. Hopefully I can get something on paper. If Matt can. Do you think you can send something out before you go away, Matt?
Oh yeah, and like I said to you guys, I will be checking my email. So I just sent something to the engineer, and he says I will look into it. So that's positive. So for the electronic copies, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But even during the week, I will be checking my emails, and if I got something in that week, I will get that to you guys.
And so I am just curious if that's a project that gets reviewed, it's on the public record. I'm just thinking if I was the consultant for that, I may not want that being torn apart in public.
Well, I don't think we're going to tear it apart. I think we're going to fix it.
Well, we can also scrub could scrub the names off it.
Yeah,
Matt,
I
just
if you can redact whatever information
we're
would be
not
appropriate.
not going to throw anybody under the bus.
I
Yeah.
don't think we purposely do that, but I do think
We've
sometimes it
we've
comes
been doing
across
it all
that
day.
way.
Why stop now, Stu?
Well, just to let you guys know, so the project never moved forward. So
Okay.
it's all just on paper. And
But it's
so
still,
no, I
still a
got you.
consultant's name. It's still, you know,
Sure.
engineer's
Oh,
name,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. I just want to be mindful of their privacy.
Good point. Good point. I told them why I was looking for it too. So to your point, thank you.
Yeah.
And I did. I said,
Just
school
remind, when
committee.
you send it out, just remind me, because I'll be passing it along to people in my office. But we'll just
Yeah.
take their title blocks right off of it.
Okay.
So with the name, so nobody's on there. Just
Okay.
as far as we're concerned, it's just a puzzle to play with, you know.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
A
yeah.
real world
It's
example.
not, we don't want it to look like something real or pick on
Right.
somebody.
You may be able to just put it into AI and just ask AI to take all of the
Yep.
distinguishing things out of it. It would be a quick way to do it.
Wow.
So let's see what format we get. Okay, so.
All right. Well, we're 12 minutes out of
But
time here.
Did
So
we decide on a time though on Monday?
on the 29th,
Yeah.
look,
Ten's
Peter,
fine
I
with me.
think,
Whatever
I
you
think,
want.
and Matt, you said you were okay, right? With the whatever
anytime.
time. Let's just
Sure.
stick with 10 o'clock then.
Okay.
You know, what Tuesday, we're gonna do the following Tuesday, 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, Peter, are you, I don't know if you're, can I just
Which-
confirm that you got that for the 29th at 10 o'clock?
Okay, so would it be an hour meeting, or do you guys want another 2-hour meeting, or how long?
What do you
Let's
guys
hope
think?
we
Personally,
can get this thing done in a
better do
little
two.
quicker format.
Yeah, I would hope for an hour, right?
Yeah.
If we get information ahead of time, people can maybe take a look ahead of time. That would be good.
Well, look, we're at a point where my input is we don't have much time left, and I would rather get through this and be done with it.
So,
than-
We have,
than
yeah, I'm just
rescheduling
mindful
another
of
meeting.
Yeah.
it is my vacation week, so
so how about we do this, Audra, if you're okay? Peter, just schedule it for 2 hours and we'll all endeavor to make it an hour, but we'll give
Yeah.
ourselves that leeway.
Also,
and grace if we need it.
if I hit a roadblock, I'll let everybody know and we might put it off. You know what I mean? Just see what we get, what I can do with it.
Me too.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for all the time. Merry
Have a good one.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Have a good